Good morning. Well, actually, it's afternoon. I am going to introduce ourselves, which we've done already, but I'll do it one more time. My name is Sarah Bannon. I'm the head of literature at the Arts Council, and what that means now is I'm the head of English language literature. And also with me is
Ashling, and I'm the new head of Irish language literature and Irish language arts.
And I'm here to talk to you. We're all here to talk to you about the Literature Bursary Award. And Literature Bursary is one of the most important things that I think we do here in the Arts Council to support writers. But before I really start the presentation, I'm going to make three important points. The first is that we provide access support. So we make every effort to provide reasonable accommodation for people with disabilities or access requirements. We have an access officer. Their phone number is here on our website. And if you have any access requirements, if you need any additional help, if you have a disability, we really encourage you to get on to our access officer as soon as possible before the deadline so they can give you any help. Secondly, we always encourage new applicants. One of the reasons why we do clinics like this is just to try to demystify applying for Arts Council funding. But we know that there are lots of barriers that exist for artists in Ireland, and we want that to change. We have an EDI policy, it's on our website, and we encourage applications from all areas of our community, regardless of your gender, sexual orientation, civil or family status, religion, age, disability, race, or membership of the traveller community, or socioeconomic background. And as I say, we have an EDI policy. It is on our website, and you can take a look at it there. And then finally, everything that we're going to say to you this afternoon, is in the guidelines. So don't worry about frantically taking notes. I'm not going to be saying anything here that isn't actually in the guidelines. So
Sorry,
again,
Sarah. There's
yes.
one person in the chat, sorry, that says they have no sound, but I can
Oh,
hear everything. If anyone else has an issue with sound, can they let us know? Because if not, it may just be that person needs to turn up the sound on their own computer or laptop. But if anyone else has an issue, Aletta, I can't seem to write into the chat. Would you be able to ask people if they can hear us?
Yes, I'll do that.
No, they can hear. Okay, it must be that person then. Thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm glad I can be heard. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our support for literature and the wider context before we get into the detail of the bursary, just because I think it's really important for people to know that these are direct funding supports, but there are also a lot of other ways that we're supporting writers and writing in Ireland. We have a literature policy, it's on our website, and it puts the writer and the picture bookmaker at the heart of the art form. But it's not just about direct funding, as I say. There are lots of other and important ways that our work supports writers, particularly when they're starting out. We support a number of publishers and journals. We see this as a really important way for people to get their work out to an audience, to work with an editor for the first time. We support a whole range, over 30 publishers and journals, and we're always looking for new outlets so that all kinds of voices can be published and can go through that really important process of editing and bringing their work to publication standard. Again, all those that we support are listed on our website. We also support a lot of festivals and events. We support them through strategic funding, arts grant funding, from really, really small festivals that might focus on maybe just a short story or poetry or the kind of regional literature, to those that are multidisciplinary and cover every art form. And we see those as a chance for audiences to hear and meet writers, and for writers to meet with one another. They're great networking opportunities. And then really importantly, we also support resource organizations. So these we'd like to think for writers are their first port of call when they're starting out or throughout their careers. So for poetry, there's Poetry Ireland. There's the Irish Writers Centre, which focuses on prose writers. There's Children's Books Ireland, which looks at writers and picture bookmakers of children's literature. There's the Munster Literature Centre, which is a bit like Poetry Ireland, the Irish Writers Centre in the Munster region. And then Literature Ireland, which focuses on the translation of Irish work abroad and the promotion of Irish literature abroad. So all of those are really important organizations to know about. And if you don't know about them already, we really encourage you to seek them out. So Aisling, are we okay for questions for now?
Yep, all good. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so now without further ado, we are going to go into the Literature Bursary Award. So their closing dates. We have two closing dates a year. The first is the Thursday, the 15th of February at 5:30, and the second is Thursday, the 5th of June. You can only apply for one of those. We have two deadlines in order to allow for artists to plan their lives. And some people are ready at the beginning of the year, some people towards the end, but it's just to give you an option. So you can apply for one or the other of those. The guidelines won't change between the 2 rounds. The purpose of the Bursary Award is really, really simple. It's to enable picture book artists and writers to do the following: to think, research, reflect, create, and write. To concentrate on your work for a period of time, and usually by releasing you from your financial commitments. So it's all about buying time, is always the way we refer to it. So you can apply for a bursary based on the scale of your proposal, what you want to do, and the amount of time you want to devote to it. You can apply for one of 3 amounts for a bursary award: 10,000, 15,000, or 20,000 euro. And that's, you apply for the amount that you think you need, given the scale of what you're working on and how long you think you need. It's up to you. And we put the trust in you on that. And as I say, the emphasis is on buying time. So it could mean that all you're applying for is your time, either to take time off work, to pay for childcare, to release you from some of your freelance responsibilities. And the amount that you pay yourself may be all that you're applying for. And that's absolutely fine. And a lot of times in literature bursary, that is what people apply for. It can also cover costs like fees that you might give to a mentor or a collaborator, or materials, but that's just up to 15% of the amount requested. So maybe you need a new computer or a printer or that, but it wouldn't be the whole of the award. Aisling, are we okay for questions?
Yeah, we've one question in the chat, just someone asking if the bursary is available for only people in the Republic, or do we accept applicants from the North as well?
So we'll get to that in a little bit. But if you're not a resident of the Republic of Ireland, you need to write to us and outline the way in which your application would benefit the arts here in Ireland, and we'd need to be satisfied by your explanation that it would have an impact here on the arts in the Republic of Ireland for us to accept the application. So primarily, it is open to writers who are resident in the Republic of Ireland, but there are some exceptions, and those are detailed within the guidelines, and we deal with them on a case-by-case basis. Okay?
Thank you.
So knowing all that, what the bursary is, it's about buying time. It's really simple. For writers in particular, and for picture book makers, it seems like a really relevant award. And we've been running these bursaries since since really the Arts Council began, and we've made very few changes to them. So you decide you want to make an application. This sounds like it's right up your street. So what do you do? So there's an English language literature bursary, and there's an Irish language literature bursary. Now they're separate awards. They have separate application forms. They have a separate assessor. They have a separate peer panel. If you're writing in English, you apply in English. And if you're writing in Irish, you apply in Irish. If you're writing in both languages, you'll need to make the call, but we'll consult one another, and we can talk to you about that maybe offline if that's the case for you, but you'll have to be the one to make the call. Aisling, do you want to say a little bit about this?
Yeah, it's just that I had a Vicupa Keshtag and Fuisha August bottom just a Yevnu Ladini Mocker and Bishach and Daucht and Sporani of the Gaelga Ni ein for ver neartis, ni astro for the irtis Gaberla, Dane for Gachud and Process True Gaelga, Dane for a Masunu True Gaelga August by Ampanela play for Nahirtish by Shishin Erfad True Gaelga freshen. So I just wanted to assure people who are applying for the Irish language bursary that your application will not be translated. The assessor has Irish. The panel that will discuss the application will also do that in Irish. So just to assure people that it won't be translated.
Super. And then, as I say, if you're writing in Irish, you apply in Irish. And go on, Aisling.
Oh yes. So mátáisiú chun irtaíana bhseach as Gaeilge déanaige cínse as Gaeilge aráú an si Vigilín agus by Shib Gabran Shin. So just if you are going to apply in Irish, make sure to click the Ask Gaeilge button on that's the online services website, is it, Sarah?
It is indeed. Yeah. Okay. So you're making an application for the bursary. You're going to download the application form. It's a Word document. You're going to save it to your desktop. The first few questions we ask are autobiographical. They help us build a picture of who applies for funding. Now, the information in this initial section, it's not part of the assessment, but it helps us understand who we're reaching and who we're not. So there are questions about your gender, your race, ethnicity, etc. But again, they don't form a part of the assessment, but they help us see who we're reaching and who we're not. And then we move into this part of the application form. This is just a screenshot of the form. The very first question here, 1.6, bursary strand relevant to your application. For literature bursary, in English and Irish, this is not applicable, so you'll tick not applicable. And then you'll move on to tell us about yourself. So in just 170 words, you just briefly describe who you are and you outline your most recent artistic achievements. Now, remember, you're still going to have a chance later when I talk about supporting material to tell us more, but this is just a really brief snapshot of who you are. And then you tell us, if you'd like, what career stage you think you're at. If you're early, emerging, mid-career, established, you don't identify with that or prefer not to say. This is 1.8 is really, again, about us trying to see, trying to form a picture of who we're supporting and allowing people to self-identify. The next section is your proposal. So we're going to ask you to give us 3 bullet points. That's 2.1, summary proposal of what you want to do and why. For a lot of people, it's I want to take time out of my regular job and finish my novel. I have 20,000 words to hand. I need to get support to bring it to completion. I have an agent, or I'm working on a collection of poetry. This is what it's looking at the moment, and I need this amount of time. And then in 2.2, you'll be able to go on in a bit more detail, about 500 words, to help those who are assessing your application understand the full scope of what you want to do and why. So why would this make an impact on your writing or illustration practice at the moment? How would it allow you to reach your artistic ambition? So you only have 500 words, it's not a huge amount. And it's usually very simple for writers, at least, to explain what it is that they want to do. Within that, you don't need to give a full summary of your novel. There'll be a chance to do that if you're working on a long prose project, but you might talk a little bit about what your ambition is and what you want to accomplish with the bursary. And then the next question is your application, the assessment criteria. So you talk about why you think your application meets the assessment criteria, and that's 150 words. So I'll move on to what those criteria are next, unless there are questions, Aisling.
Yeah, there's just one in the chat. If you apply for a bursary award in February and are unsuccessful in your application, are you able to apply for a bursary award in June with a separate project?
No, you're not. So you can only apply for 1 bursary per year. So you'd be able to apply in the next year for the bursary. But your proposal would need to move on a little bit, and we'll get to that in a second. But one of the kind of principles or rules of our funding is that we won't assess the exact same application twice. Now, with bursaries, usually that means if enough time elapses, usually the proposal has moved on and your work has moved on in some way. So no, you can't apply in the second round. We have another award called the Agility Award, which I'm not going to talk about today because we haven't published our guidelines, but that's a separate award for up to €5,000, which you would be allowed to apply for as well as a bursary. But again, I'm not going to get into it today because the guidelines aren't yet published. But the short answer is no, you can't.
Yeah, and even if it's a separate project, Sarah, if it's different.
Even if it's in a different art form, because the bursary is a person, so you couldn't apply for a visual arts bursary in round 1 and then try your hand at theatre in round 2. You can apply for 1 bursary per year.
Perfect. And then there's one question, but I think you're going to get to that next. Just someone wants you to explain feasibility and what exactly do they need to prove. So I think you'll come to that.
Yeah, now. I am indeed. Very good. So the assessment criteria are as follows. Artistic quality. So we judge this based on, or the assessment is based on your track record to date. So what you've done and what's been, if in the case of a publishing track record, what you've published, and then the work in progress that you're going to submit as part of your application. So it's promise and potential, and also your track record. And there's really detailed information within the guidelines about what we mean by artistic quality. I will say in the Bursary Award, this is the criteria that does the most heavy lifting in the assessments. But in terms of your answers, you'll talk a bit about that. You also talk about how the award meets how you're going to meet the objectives and priorities of the award. So, as I say, this award is about buying time for writers and picture bookmakers. So, how does your application meet that? How are you aligned with that? And almost all applications are. And then the third is feasibility. So can you pull it off? do you have anything written to date? Do you have a track record of finishing things, of placing them with publication? It's kind of about proving that you're serious about your artistic work is where feasibility would fit in, and that's how you prove it. And again, within the guidelines, there are more detailed information or bullet points around what we mean by feasibility, but usually with the Literature Bursary Award is like, can you pull this off? Have you allowed yourself enough time? Do you have enough to hand? Will you be working consistent? Sometimes there are applications that seem almost too feasible. The work seems too progressed, and the person maybe needs more time than seems reasonable. But usually, it's just about saying, like, I've thought this through. I'm serious about my practice. This is what I've done to date. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. There's just one question, Sarah, that I'll ask you as well. If you are new and emerging, how do you prove a track record?
Well, if you don't have a track record, you don't have a track record. So the Bursary Award starts at 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 euro. That's how the range works. The Agility Award is, which I'm, as I keep saying, I'm not talking about it, but here I am. It has less emphasis on track record and more emphasis on promise and potential than perhaps the bursary does. So the Agility Award tends to be more suited for people who have less of a track record. We would expect, I mean, our awards are open to professional practicing artists, so we would expect people applying for a Bursary Award to have some either publishing track record of some sort, whether it's placing poems or stories in journals, or maybe completion of an MA in creative writing or another kind of course like that, but some kind of demonstration that the writing is at a professional level. So what that looks like can be really, really various, and I don't want to put down hard and fast rules around it, but we would be looking for some evidence of a track record. And if no track record exists, then you're going to be only going on the basis of the work in progress and the potential of what's there, which, sometimes is enough to get applicants over the line, but you would be competing against writers and picture bookmakers who have more extensive track records. And that does have to count for something because people have been working at this for a period of time. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. There's one more as well, which you may have kind of answered already. What's the difference between mid-career and established? How many accolades do you need, awards, books published, etc.?
Yeah, so that's up to you. And I mean, these are definitions people are going to be applying to themselves. We've tried to do that a little bit in the Arts Council to try to say what we think is fixed and emerging, and when will I ever really emerge from this? But that's really up to you. And at the risk of confusing you, it doesn't really matter. It's how you feel in yourself in your own practice. So again, we're using those more for our internal purposes to try to see, are we reaching people who are more mid-career? Are we reaching a lot of emerging? Or are we reaching kind of a mix across all those? But we're asking people to self-identify in the first instance. Okay.
Yep, that's everything for now. Thanks, Sarah.
So then the next section of the application form takes you through key activities in the proposal. People get a little thrown by this. The key activity is usually just like writing. The location could be your home, and the estimated time in days. So, maybe you need 365 days of the year to be working on it. That's really all all you need to include there. And then the next section is those who are involved in your proposal. So are you going to be working with a mentor? Are you going to be working with an editor? You might not be working with anyone at all, and that is absolutely fine. That section can be left blank. But if there's anyone else that you're going to be working on your proposal, you need to list them there. Then we come to the budget. So the expenditure related to your application, and you see we've tried to make it easy for people, and we've given budget lines for everything. So the fee to yourself as an artist, and within the bursary, this is often the most important part. So how much you're going to pay yourself. So that might be everything you're looking for is how much you're going to pay yourself for the time. If you're working with someone else and you need to pay them, that might be another expense. Cost of materials, that might be another expense. Any other cost that you can think of that you want to include with this, you put there. And then if there's income, and again, this can be blank. It does not need to, you don't need to be bringing income to the table, but perhaps you have savings you want to apply to it, or any other kind of income, you would include that there. This can be really simple. The budget may be as simple as the fee to yourself, and then blank in terms of income. And then you come to the next section, which is how much you're requesting from the Arts Council, and just to say that amount should be the difference between 3.1 and 3.2. Okay, so you take 3.1 and then you take away 3.2 and you come to 3.3, which is the amount that you're looking for from the Arts Council. Okay. Just to note, people do often get kind of freaked out about the budgets in this form. We use this budget template across all of our awards. So as you can imagine, when you're looking at project awards or maybe like a production award or the publication cost for a book, we really need to see that kind of granular detail. When it comes to people's living costs and the amount of time that they need, we need a lot less detail than that. So, as I said at the beginning, please, you can apply for 10,000 euro, 15,000 euro, or 20,000 euro. Your application will be deemed ineligible if you apply for more than maximum, unless you have access costs. Or if you apply for less than the minimum, will also make you ineligible, which I know seems very harsh, but that is the case. So you have to apply for just one of those amounts. And we introduced this a number of years ago, really just to make it easier for people and just to kind of take the guesswork of how much they should be applying for. If you request an amount other than one of these bands, so say you apply for 10,500 euro, we will put your application down as seeking 10,000 euro. If you apply for 19,000 euro, we will say that you applied for 15,000. We can't award people more money than they've actually asked for. And so we'll go to one of those three amounts. So just stick with one of those three amounts. Usually people are really good about this. When we first introduced it, there was more confusion, but people have gotten good at it. So again, it's just to try to take the guesswork out of things for you. Aisling, do we have any questions on that?
Yeah, there's one question.
Yeah.
Can a writing retreat be included in the costs?
It could, yeah, it could. Yeah. I think that would help you.
That's it.
So yeah, so then finally the access cost. This is the exception to the rule. So in addition to the maximum amount permitted, we will also consider access costs specifically relating to the making of work by artists with disabilities. And if you have access costs already, as I said at the top of this, you would have already been on to our access officer to talk to her about your needs. And then she'll advise you to put a short document within your application outlining what your additional access costs are. And you'll put the access amount in your budget, and that'll be included in your total amount requested. And then this describes what access costs are. So any requirements you may have in order to remove barriers that might stop you from completing your proposal. In a bursary application, this may include, for example, cost towards additional time needed to complete an element of proposal or additional assistance required to deliver your proposed activity.
Sorry, Sarah, there's one more question on the costs.
Yeah, sure.
Can travel to Bologna picture book fair be included?
No, because that is the remit, actually, and that's great for this one. That is the remit of our of the agency Culture Ireland. So Culture Ireland is the agency responsible for the promotion of the Irish arts abroad, and they fund international travel for promotional purposes, including travel to international book fairs. So this slide I have here is what you can't apply for. So you can't apply for things that don't fit the purpose of the award. So yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. And then you can't apply for activities that are better suited to another award by the Arts Council or operated by other state agencies, such as Culture Ireland, which would be the Bologna example. You can't apply for something that's already taken place. So a writing project that you've actually already completed, you can't apply retrospectively to kind of recoup the time that you spent writing that. Something that we've already assessed. So as I said before, we can't look at the same application twice, the exact same application. And now we often hear from writers over time more than once. And all I'd say on that is that we just can't look at the exact same application twice. So you need to kind of be refreshing your application. Usually your work in progress has moved on. Something needs to be different about it. We can't support things that are undertaken for charity fundraising purposes. We can't fund competitions, and we can't fund things that are primarily profit making. We don't fund self-publishing through this award. So while we'll accept applications from writers who have been self-published, the actual cost of publishing your own work, we will not support through this award. The reason for that is we've put a lot of time and effort into supporting publishers and journals, and we believe that's the most effective way for writers to get their work to audience and to bring it to the highest standard possible. Then we won't support large-scale capital costs, and finally, we won't support activities or proposals that don't fall within our definition of literature, which is here. So for the purpose of the award and for the purpose of the Arts Council, we say that literature is fiction, poetry, creative nonfiction, graphic novels, children's fiction and poetry, and illustrated picture books. So we don't support a whole load of other areas that are that are not listed there, like screenwriting, journalism, history, cookery writing, religious writing, professional academic writing, instructional writing, literary translation. And then if you are a playwright, that's over to our colleagues in the theatre team. So we do support playwriting, but just not through literature. So they're the guys who'll be looking after playwriting. Aisling, do we have questions?
Yes, and sorry, thank you for someone letting me know. We had a few questions that I missed that were in the Q&A tab, not the chat, so
great.
I'll go through them now. There's one more in the chat, and it was probably just to make clear, if you plan to self-publish, you cannot apply. If you could just...
Well,
that's the question.
You could apply for your time, but you can't apply for the costs of publishing the book yourself. So you could apply for your time in writing, but you can't apply for the publication costs.
Thank you. So there's just 4 questions that I missed. Yeah. Sorry to everybody. So the first one, if your bursary application is not successful, can you apply for an Agility Award with the scaled down version of the same project?
Yeah, I think, and again, those guidelines aren't published yet, so we'll look at what those are. But yeah, I mean, it will have to be a different proposal because it'll be for less money. But I think that probably is okay so long as the proposal is sufficiently different.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then, oftentimes funding like this can have expectations of results. Does this include an expectation of results? What you don't get responses from agents, publishing houses, for example?
Oh, that is such a good question. So what is brilliant about the bursary is that no, we don't have expectations of like results or immediate results. Our experience over the years, and certainly my experience in this role, is that every bursary application and every award that is given has a kind of a different journey, and some end up in publication at the end of a year, some 10 years later, or some pursue what they applied for the year and then go off and do something different entirely. So this is really about freedom. It is really about releasing you from the kind of the expectations. This is not a product-oriented award. So no, it is completely about your time. So I'll get to it in a little bit, but at the end of the award, all we ask for is a report form from you where you tell us about your experience of the award and what it has given you. And even if it doesn't result in publication, I can tell you that every single report form that we read does result in some kind of artistic development by the writers who receive them. It's a great question.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. And then the next one, if you already have a contract and are working with the publisher on edits, should they be added into the application?
Yeah, probably they should. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and it depends on how far. I mean, that sounds like a project that is kind of far along as well. So you need to kind of think about whether or not you are really applying for that writing proposal or for a different writing proposal, because it depends on how far along you are in the editing process. So just to kind of, because as I said before, we won't fund something that is already completed. So just to kind of think about that. But you could be working on the edits of something and starting something new, and that could form the basis of your application.
Okay, and then another. Sorry, there's a few, if that's okay.
Yeah,
another one in relation to costs. If you have a cost to publish a book, is this to be specified as that under the cost section?
Yes, but yes, but that sounds like that sounds a little bit like self-publishing, or and certainly the Arts Council we don't support publishers who would seek a financial contribution towards the publication of the book. So that would be a cost, but it wouldn't be a cost we would cover as part of the bursary.
Okay. There's a few more in the chat. Do you want to go through them now, or do you want to go through some more slides first?
I might go through a few more slides, and then we can kind of group them maybe towards the end.
I think you might cover some of them.
Yeah, great. Perfect. So then that's the end of the application, just the budget. And then there's a checklist at the back of the application, which tells you it's a checklist. So there are two pieces of supporting material that are required, and I'm going to come to those in a second. Your CV and examples of work, and in case of literature bursary, it's a work in progress. So this is a screenshot again from the application form. So you can see there are two pieces that are absolutely required, and there are three others that are optional. So the supporting material, there are two really important pieces. So you've done your application form, you've finished that, you'll be submitting your application form, and then you'll be submitting your artistic CV. And it shouldn't be more than 3 pages, and it will highlight your achievements as a professional artist. It will form a central part of your application and should detail your track record as a writer and or a picture book artist. And then the next piece is your work in progress. And this is a really, really important part of the application for the Bursary Award. It shouldn't have been previously published. It needs to be new, and it needs to relate specifically to your proposal. So don't talk about one book or one collection in your proposal and then give us a totally separate sample. And then we ask you to submit according to your form. So if you're a prose writer, up to 4,000 words of a work in progress for which the application is being made, it should be in 12-point font and double spaced. For poetry, we say 10 pages of poetry, single space with no more than 1 poem per page. And for picture book artists, 10 images, pages that relate specifically to your bursary proposal, including a text sample if it's applicable. And you should also include up to 5 images that demonstrate your illustration practice to date. And if you have a dummy book available, you can submit that as well. But those are the requirements. Again, those are all in the all within the guidelines. But the important part to take away is that this should be it's a work in progress. It should be strong because this piece tends to hold a lot of weight, both by the assessor and by the panel. But it can't have been published already. So again, and the reason we do that is just to kind of even the playing field for writers across career stages. And then finally, in addition to those, you can also submit extracts of previously published work. So sometimes for poets in particular, they'll say, like, I have 10 unpublished pieces, but my collection is going to include a few things that I've placed elsewhere, so they want to include that. Go for it. We've talked before, if your proposal relies on the expertise of other people, you should submit brief biographies outlining their expertise. If your sample, if it's from the center of your novel, or if it requires some kind of explanation, provide some explanation of that. You can put in a 1-pager just to say this is the kind of the overall summary of the novel, or the blurb. At the beginning, I showed you the application form and showed you where you tell us about yourself. That little tell us about yourself, that doesn't count as your CV. Sometimes people think, but I already told you all about me. You have to have a CV as well. And then the supporting materials, I say, they have to be separate and additional to your application form. And just to bear in mind that a number of people are going to be reading it, so make sure your documents are really readable and clear. Okay, so you've done it, you've applied, and then you're going to get 2 emails from us in the Arts Council. One is an acknowledgement, and one contains your application number. We do an eligibility check here in the Arts Council to make sure you submitted all the supporting material, that it came in on time, that you applied for the right amount. One of the 3 amounts that I mentioned, the 10, 15, and 20, and then your application goes on for assessment. So the assessment process is as follows. Again, this is all detailed within the guidelines. We have a shortlisting process, which is done by the literature advisor. In the English language bursary, it's the English language literature advisor who, because we receive an awful lot of applications for the English language bursary, often works with a couple other advisors. And they shortlist the applications based on the criteria. All the shortlisted applications then go to a peer panel. And that changes every single time that we run the Bursary Award. For the English language bursary, that's usually made up of 4 people: a prose writer, a poet, a children's writer, and then someone who maybe has expertise across a few different areas, like an editor. And of those 4 people, we always try to ensure that one person is maybe international, so that they bring a fresh perspective. They receive all of the shortlisted applications in an online portal. They're able to read the shortlisting comments by the assessors, and then they come together for an online meeting in which we discuss each application in turn about against the criteria, and they score the applications. There are 4 scores. A is must fund, B is should fund, C is could fund, and D is not a priority. Each letter has a numerical value attached to it. Each panelist gets one, gets to give a score. We add up how many A's everyone got, how many B's, and then in a kind of a Eurovision style, you see everyone's scores come up, and basically the panel awards the money until the money runs out, and that's how it works. And then the decisions are noted by the Arts Council. In the case of the English Language Literature Bursary, I'm there. The panels are chaired by a member of the Arts Council. For the Irish Language Literature Bursary, Aisling is there, along with 3 panelists, but the process is the same across all the art forms. And then all the decisions are noted by the Arts Council. I'm sure there are questions about that, but will we scoop up all our questions at the end, do you think?
Yeah, I think I'll keep a track, because I think it's best to do them all at the end, because you might cover some. Yeah.
Great. So we'll issue our decisions within 12 to 16 weeks. The award is really, really competitive. We encourage people to ask for your assessment report, which is the bit that the advisor would have written about your application. We also give the context of the scores in the case of where you were shortlisted. And then, as I mentioned before, if you do receive funding from the Arts Council, we'll ask for a report form from you at the very end of when you're drawing down your final installment of funding. So after you get your decision, just to remember that everything is assessed in a competitive context. So remember, I talked about the criteria. There's artistic quality, how well your application meets the objectives of the award, and feasibility. There's also just the competitive context. So how feasible is it compared to so-and-so's application or all the others in the field? And we always receive a lot more applications than we're in a position to support. So we really do encourage people to ask for their assessment, even if they are successful, because often people who are unsuccessful ask for their assessment, but if they've received an award, they don't ask for it. And no matter what, I just would really encourage people not to get discouraged. Our role here is to try to encourage people in their creative practice and artistic practice, not to discourage you. And I've been in the role long enough to kind of see people come through who maybe have been turned down in the past, but certainly come and talk to us after your decision, and we can talk about next steps and whether or not you want to apply again, or maybe there's another award you want to look at. So there are common mistakes with the bursary. Missing the deadline is a big one. So if you miss the deadline, you miss the deadline. If you leave it too late, just, it's a finicky online system, online systems or our own computers at home can be kind of finicky. So I always tell people to pretend like the closing date is maybe 2 days ahead of it. So the closing date is the 15th of February, so maybe pretend it's the 13th. People upload the wrong supporting materials, so they put in a different document as opposed to their CV, or maybe they don't read the guidelines. Finally, sorry, I'm coming to the end. We recommend that you aim to upload your application 48 hours before the advertised deadline. So like my thing of just pretending like it's a different date. That way, if you have a problem, you have time to contact us so we can assist you in resolving it. And then, because so many people use the online system on the last day of the deadline, no matter how many times we tell you not to, if you come to us with a technical issue after 2 p.m. on the day of the deadline, we might not be able to resolve it. So if you have technical questions, there's a separate section of our website which just deals with online services. I am not the technical person there. They have an email address, and there's a really good YouTube video for how to upload your application. But if you have non-technical questions, you can contact myself, Aisling, Aletta, or Steffi on the literature team. And all of our details are on our website. And then I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to open up to questions, and I think the recording is going to end there.